Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of infectious grooves, checking out a band that I think we've checked out before because I vaguely remember rhyming their name and having a bit of fun with it, but I can't quite place a sound on them, so I'm not sure if we've checked them out before or not, but they are Can. We're going to be looking at the track Vitamin C. So let's dive into this and see what kind of infectious groove Can is going to bring to the table. Not really wasting any time. We were into the lyrics just 2 seconds into the song. Dude, I've heard this before. What? I like how we have what sounds like a concert bass drum. Oh no, that's a punchy bass, isn't it? Maybe a Tim. I actually don't know. No, see, that sounds like a bass drum, but it doesn't sound like a floored bass drum. It's too large. Very ornamental, though. Little vamping guitar over here. Interesting little interlude here. Split cymbal work. That's giving us our quarter notes. We have the groove on the bass drum. Little plucking guitar over here. That's our foundation. That's it. It's very minimal. Such an interesting lift too. Huh. Alright. When I break for lyrics, I'm also going to see if we've checked this out before. And I might do a quick search and see where it's shown up in pop culture. I have heard this song before. But all that's familiar to me is the chorus. You're losing, you're losing, you're losing. As soon as that kicked in, I was like, nah. Dude, I know what this is, but like, I don't know what it is. I've never heard it. It's not like I've intentionally listened to it. At least I don't think. I don't know. It's one of those things, though, where like, based on band and song title, you have no idea what you're getting into, and then it unlocks something. You're like, wait a second, I've heard this before. Had been in a movie or something, though. I think that's wild. That's such a bizarre feeling. It's like musical deja vu, where you don't know why you know what you know, but you know it. That got a little confusing. Geez. Let's start with some dissection here. The song is primarily foundation. I kind of broke it down a little bit there at the end as we had the heavy repetition in that bridge interlude, but we have the cymbal work. It sounds like there's two cymbals. They're pushed off to the side, and I don't know what they were. One was a cymbal being hit. I'm not sure about the other one. It might have been a closed hi-hat. Might have been a hi-hat closing with the pedal, but they were separated. Very interesting placement for that. And this was accompanied by the syncopated groove given to us by the bass drum, which I'm going to reiterate sounds too big to be a floor bass drum. So either they have a massive bass drum underneath their kit, which they'd have to build around, I'd suppose, or what's more likely to me is that they have a traditional orchestral bass drum, and they have it propped up on a stand, and they're just hitting it on the side. It also kind of sounded timpani-like at times, but I think a lot of that just comes from the bounce at the tip of the sound. I don't know if that makes sense to people. That's how I envision percussive timbre. But I don't know, there's at times I'm like, nah, it's not a timpani, that's a bass drum. So it's just a very large drum in general. And at one time, it even had I don't know, I confused it with a bass guitar for a moment. There's something really awkward about the timbre, and I don't know if it's the production, I don't know if it's just a very interesting drum that maybe I've never heard before, and it has some cool colorings and characteristics to its sound. It could all also be production, though, as I mentioned. It could just be a regular drum kit bass, and it's boosted up in mix and made sound larger and fuller and punchier. I don't know, man. It sounds a bit different to me. And it also feels produced in a different field, a different area of the sound sphere than the cymbals. It doesn't sound like it's part of the same kit, even though it could be. So there's a few things going on in there that's kind of making it difficult for me to ascertain exactly what instrument that is. But that's also very cool. It creates this ambiguity to it. So often I listen to music and I just know everything that's going on, and to be surprised by something like this, it's fun. I always enjoy that. And then, of course, aside from the percussive elements off to the left, we have this tiny little plucky guitar getting vamped on, usually just a single chord and some rhythmic ideas to play on it, usually to juxtapose what the bass kick is doing, which is giving us that strong syncopation against the backbeat. So on the rhythm side, we have the standard beat, every quarter note. Then we also have the syncopated beat, which plays off of that, and then the ornamental beat, which pops in every once in a while. It's pretty cool to see these percussive layerings present here. That takes up a vast majority of the song. Everything else is either melody, coming from our lead vocals, or ornamental. There's a lot of ornamental stuff in here. It kind of reminds me of electronic music more than rock, which is probably where I'd put this, just because it seems like every time a sound pops up to fill some of the empty space in this song, there's a lot of empty space, it's a brand new sound. There's panning that goes on some of them. There's maybe a type of digitization. I don't know how old this song is. The production tells me it's on the older side. So I don't know where digital instrumentation technology was at the time this came out, but some sort of synthesizer effect, or even just pedals for guitars. just different ways to make sounds, not necessarily musical ones where they're trying to craft a melody or a harmony for the song, but just trying to paint an atmosphere with texture that they're creating. And these come in a variety of effects, thinner and wider and punchier and softer and more pointed staccato notes versus longer held out ideas. And of course, like I mentioned, the timbres are all over the place. So uh, it's interesting. Every moment of the song, I'm kind of curious what's going to happen next, and it isn't always a consistency of the atmospheric sounds either. There's also the heavy use of silence and space in this track. I mentioned that the foundation's pretty small. Above that, we have the vocals, and then we occasionally have the ornamental stuff. Well, when we don't have that, though, it's just empty space up there. So they do a great job of balancing, filling the space and leaving it open to be felt by the listener. And I've kind of brought it up a couple of times, but the vocals, they give us the melody to all of this. It's the thing that makes the song feel like it's moving somewhere. Everything else is about the space. The foundation sets the floor for everything to be built on, and then the atmosphere paints the picture. It gives us the emotion of the section, but all of that's static. It doesn't lead anywhere. And that's what the vocals do. They give us direction. And they're kind of simple, too. Barely providing the function of linear melody. And granted, they're not even that linear either. We do have a looped ostinato in both the verse and the chorus, but the chorus has a longer loop before it starts over. What I find really interesting about it is that it is simultaneously catchy and not catchy. Every part of the verse, I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. I dig the way that the vocals work against the foundational stuff. It builds. It's all cohesive. It's crafting the same thing here. It's all working together to build the sound and to push through it. But it never quite catches my ear until the chorus comes around, and now I'm not able to get that out of my head. That repetition of losing your is just... that's an earworm right there. It's so good. But the vocals do something really interesting too. I forgot to really focus in on harmony and chord progression. And so I don't remember if it was a one chord phrase or a two chord phrase. There's not a lot of harmonic movement though, is what I'm getting at. The song is rather static in its atmosphere and emotion. As I said, there's really only one thing that wants to push forward, and itself is stuck in a loop. Everything else is rather static. But there's one huge change. On the 5th bar, I think it is, of every chorus, well, of the 8-bar phrase in the chorus, we have an upturn. The instruments pull up a little bit. There's a lift out of the slightly heavier and drearier sound into something with a bit more energy, not necessarily happy, but not dreary either. And it's right before he says vitamin C, which of course there's that little hiccup there. It doesn't come in on the downbeat of 1. It's a little bit after that to create this weird syncopation, a bounce off of the beginning of this phrase. But it gives the chordal shift a moment to shine through, and we get to hear that first. Oh, that chord came out of nowhere. We haven't heard anything like that this song. And then there's the awkward vitamin C just coming off real quick. And that whole section is very obtuse in a way that ends up working to their favor. The song is rather palatable, I think, except for this one single bar. Harmonically, it's interesting because it's unexpected. Rhythmically, it's kind of awkward, and as far as the melody goes, it's not really... I mean, it ends up being catchy, by being quirky, but it is quirky. It's also an unusual way to deliver that, especially when up to that point the vocals have been very clear. They've presented enough time for all the syllables to come through and be understood. And here there was plenty of time to do that, but they delayed starting the phrase vitamin C, and so they had to cram it all into such a short amount of time. All of this, of course, with that harmonic turn underneath. It is a bizarre choice, but ends up being a defining element of this song in a way that helps it stand out and doesn't really work against it in any way. It's awkward, unusual, but ultimately a little charming. It ends up working somehow while also being a unique element. And so we have this verse and this chorus. Foundationally, melodically, very similar all throughout, but atmospherically we have change, always altering what kind of sounds and when they're present and all this ornamental stuff. And we do 2 sets of these, first chorus, verse chorus. Then we get to the bridge. And this takes the simplicity and the narrow-minded, static nature of the song. It's hyper-focused on one specific feeling and idea and leans into it, honestly. The vocal melody is gone, the textures, the ornamentation, they're all gone too. It's just the foundation and an organ solo, if I remember correctly. And it kind of goes nowhere. The solo is well done. I don't think there's anything in it that doesn't work. It's harmonically consistent. It's always consonant. The notes feel right. The melody isn't difficult to follow. But it is a bit on the simpler side. There's nothing in here that calls out to me as anything of interest. It is... I don't want to be so negative about it, but it's sort of like filler. We needed something in the bridge, so we put this little organ idea. But I wonder if it's something more than that, because of its stark contrast to the way that the vocal melodies invite the atmospheric randomness in. All of those ornamental ideas paired with the vocal melody create something that feels wildly more dynamic than what we get in the bridge, even though it wasn't really dynamic to begin with. By contrast, this bridge is static. It is simple. It's kind of lacking that oomph, the spice. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not something I would order, you know? If it was food, it's lacking the spice, the flavor. It's fine. It's just good. And so when we come back to that final chorus, it now punches. It feels more dynamic than ever. I'm really glad we've come back to this. This is a fantastic way to end the song. Something that I felt wasn't very strong originally is, by comparison, a really great ending compared to what we came through in the bridge there. So that it's not really high contrast, but it feels very contrasty, and so I kind of like that, but I'm not sure what it means. What's the purpose of it? There's also the whole volume thing where the vocals in the verse and chorus is very dominant. They're large, they take up so much space, and then we get to the organ which replaces it, and it's kind of quiet and meek, and I think this also lends itself to feeling a bit less dynamic and kind of one note. It's the production on it. So I don't really know how to take it. it's an interesting decision. Maybe the lyrics will lean into it. Maybe this is what happens when we don't get our vitamin C and life starts to get a little gray. Get a little bit of orange juice in your system and you're back to the vibrancy of the chorus. I don't know. I'm going to check out some lyrics and see what they're talking about with this. Well, on the one hand, I'm glad there's genius annotations. I don't know that I would have picked up on the main idea here, even though it's quite obvious in hindsight. But on the other hand, I don't really think I have any way of tying any of this back to the music. None of this really went in a way that I expected. The verses describe somebody, particularly, I suppose, a girl. It says her daddy and her mommy. Says her dad got a big aeroplane and her mom holds all the family cash. She's a beautiful rose. And so it's supposed to be describing a child of a wealthy family. And it talks about, well, the second verse says, most of Christmas in and out of body, she's slipping on quicksand. Once again, a beautiful rose. She's living in and out of tune. I'm not entirely sure what all this is supposed to be tied together about. I get the concept that we're looking at this person who comes from wealth, but what's the story? What's the conflict here? Because that's it. That's the entire verse. That's like 90% of the song right there. Is that her dad and mom have a bunch of money and she's a beautiful rose and she slips on quicksand, which of course is a metaphor, but for what? The chorus then says, hey, you're losing your vitamin C. And the annotation here talks about how vitamin C helps us build our immune system. And it relates this back to the wealthy child, that she grew up in a sheltered home, away from the realities of life, and thus she didn't have an immune system to real living. She was too pampered. But again, what's going on in the verse? That where's the conflict? So I'm a little lost on that. That's the entire song, though. And so I'm trying to pair this back to the very light, mellow music of this, the awkward choice at the middle of each of the chorus repetitions, the quiet, even boring interlude in the bridge. What does all this have to do with this song about somebody who never was given the opportunity to learn how to live outside of their mansion or whatever? I don't know. I'm curious. What's everybody else's take on this? Because those are my thoughts on Can's Vitamin C. Oh, real quick, I have no idea where I heard this before. I looked through probably not an exhaustive list of media it's been presented in. My best guess might be the Get Down, a Netflix series. There's 2 seasons, anyways, about the growth of wordsmiths and DJing in New Jersey, New York. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I watched it. It was a really great show, though, and I highly recommend it. But apparently it showed up in there, and that was the only thing in the list that I had seen. So maybe it was that. I don't know. That chorus, though, it's not something you forget or you just make up. I've heard that chorus. I just don't know where. So anyways, yeah, back to this outro. Put your thoughts, comments, perspectives down in the comment section. Let me know what you thought of this track, if there's anything that stood out to you, all that kind of stuff. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree that takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. Alright, that wraps it up for this one. I will have... No... There's another one today. It's a special selection. I will be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.